Gal.
Hey guys, and welcome to Get a Life Podcast Kunai. I am joined with Will once more.
Hey.
And today we're going to be talking about, I don't know how to explain it, the fated anime. The anime that we reference on Kunai almost all the time when something fucks up or whenever we cock up on Kunai.
Wait. I was supposed to watch Fate? You said the fated anime.
I mean the fated anime as in the anime that we talk about all the time on Kunai, the legend. It is Denki-Gai no Honya San. That is what we're going to be talking about today. Before we get into the bulk of the discussion, I'm just going to go in with the disclaimer. For you new folks, Get a Life Podcast Kunai is a monthly anime discussion podcast under the Get a Life group. Due to the nature of the discussion, we can't avoid spoilers of the show to be discussed. For those shows that are based off existing pieces of work, whether it's manga, light novel, or some other media form, we're not going to be covering the source material for those. If you'd like to recommend a show for us to watch and make an episode of Kunai, leave a suggestion on our Discord, getalifepodcast.com/Discord. Big thanks to our sponsors, Japan Crate, and our headline sponsor, Crunchyroll, which you can actually view this anime if you like to on Crunchyroll using our link, crunchyroll.com/Kunai. So, Will,
Yes.
First of all, how are you today? Are you good?
Really tired. I mean, I'm good, but I'm also tired. I had a long day. Good day, but like I'm tired for good reasons. But like I'm, really happy to be recording this episode with you today.
Okay, well, that's good. For those that don't know, Denki-Gai no Honya San, basically Electric Town's bookstore, also known as Denki-Gai, is a manga series illustrated by Asato Mizu. It's basically a slice of life story that focuses on a manga shop called Umanohone, which means the horse's bone, which is a bit weird. It's a reference, actually I didn't know this, it's a reference to a real life manga shop called the Tiger's Lair.
Also known as Tora no Ana.
Yeah. Have you been there before? Or?
Oh yeah, dude. I love that store. Yeah, it's great.
Okay, I didn't even know it was a real thing until now.
I mean, I caught it right away when I saw like the store in the anime. It looks just like the store in the real world. They just obviously couldn't actually call it the real name.
Which makes sense. I understand, because there's a lot of things in this show that they have to change up. I'm guessing due to licensing reasons or due to not getting sued and things like that. So this actually aired in the fall of 2014 from October to December. It's only had 12 episodes, but it was competing with quite a lot that season. Just for some context, Your Lie in April aired around this time. Parasite, Seven Deadly Sins, Fate's Day Night, Unlimited Blade Works. You had so much more as well. Log Horizon second season, Amagi Brilliant Park. I'm trying to think. You had Shirobako, which we covered on Kunai as well.
World Trigger.
I can't understand what my husband's saying. You had so many shows, and I think Sword Art season 2 as well was like around that time. So you had so many shows. So I think for a lot of people, this kind of went under a lot of people's radar, especially because it wasn't really done by a well-known animation studio. It was actually animated by Shin-Ei Animation, who actually done the animation for Doraemon and Shin-Chan. I mean, they're a big studio in that sense, but they're also not known for much.
Yeah, I was gonna say something about that, because like that's one thing, like how you said how it kind of flew under the radar. For me personally, like this show is normally something that's right up my alley completely, but I didn't even know about it until you suggested to watch it for Kunai.
Yeah, you know what? It's quite interesting because looking more into it, I don't know, there's something about it. Even if you look at like Asato Mizu's stuff, I'm pretty sure there's some other stuff that he's doing at the moment, right? If I'm not mistaken, like Aharen-san, I'm not sure.
I think there's another kind of like a small series that he did that got like kind of notoriously popular, but I can't think of what it is off the top of my head. But I remember him doing something not too long ago that kind of blew up for like, and it was like a flash, like it was big for a minute and then gone kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Which kind of like, unfortunately, kind of seems to be his style. Like I know he even did something with the K-On! Franchise. Like even though he wasn't like one of the main people who worked on K-On!, he did like a K-On book that like, you know, was kind of like, what do you want to call it? Not an epilogue, but it was just kind of like extra stories after the end of the main manga.
If I'm not mistaken, I think it's like the manga where they go into college and stuff like that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think it's that one. I can't remember exactly, but yeah.
Yeah, it's listed on here. It's K-On! The anthology comic. So there was like only one volume or something. Like it was like a one-shot manga. But in general, this is actually the first animated show of his published works. And obviously the second being Aharon-san, which is coming out later on this year, which should be interesting. I wanted to know your first impressions because you've mentioned that you didn't know much about the show during its initial release and you only found out because of kunai.
I wanted to kind of go into this one blind, as it were, because you know how we've talked in the past that usually I'm the type of person that, like, you know, when I get into something, I'll look to see who was involved, like, you know, who was the producer, who was the director, who wrote the story and all that type of stuff. But I at least went into the first episode of this just completely blind, not knowing what to expect other than like some of the brief stuff that you told me about. So like just with the first episode, I'm like, okay, I can tell I'm already gonna like this. It already had me laughing, it already had funny bits, it had sweet stuff to it, but then like it kind of slapped me across the face with a little bit of like the ecchi bits, and it's not an ecchi series, but like it uses them like jokes and things like that, and it was just like, but it makes sense when you think about the setting of the shop that they're in. Now I will say in like the real life shop, which they kind of show it in the anime a bit but not as much, is that, I mean, it's like a normal manga shop. Like they have normal mainstream manga and everything, you know, and there's multiple floors of it too, so that's why, like, you know, through the show you really don't get to see all the staff of the show. It just focuses on this one group, and usually there's different staff that work on the different floors, and like each floor will have a theme. Like you'll have your newer releases on the ground floor and mainstream books, and like maybe your next floor will be like secondhand books. Then you'll have a floor that's all BL stuff, and you'll have another floor that's all doujinshi and things like that, etc. You know, that jumped out at me, just the, you know, a little bit of the accuracy of it too. And I'm sure that, you know, the author of the series obviously spends a lot of time in manga and doujinshi shops too. But anyway, they said my first impression was it was funny and sweet right off the bat. I wasn't expecting any of the rom-com stuff. That I literally wasn't expecting that at all, but honestly it was kind of a pleasant surprise. So and I love series like this, these, you know, simple comedy kind of, I don't want to say it's not straight slice of life, but it reminds me of a series something like Working or even Rail Wars, where even like in Rail Wars there, you know, that's got a lot of comedy and ecchi in it too, but they are still working a job with these trains and everything, or even something like Amagi Brilliant Park. So yeah, it has a lot going for it in a small package, I guess is the easiest way I could say it.
You know, it's interesting that you bring up Rail Wars because I fucking love that anime. As soon as you mentioned it, it brought it back up in my head. But
I've actually seriously been thinking about rewatching Rail Wars here. I've been thinking about it for a couple months now.
Such a good show. I mean, I want to suggest it for kunai, but that's besides the point. But it's interesting that you mentioned that, because for me, right, I didn't even think about this. I didn't consider this in my initial watch for kunai. So the way that it happened was I suggested it because I happened to stumble upon it around February 2015. So this was right before Joe was joining kunai, and it was just me and Tyson. And I was like, I think this was for episode 11 of kunai. So we just finished Mao-sama, and I was like, okay,
oh my gosh, it was so long ago.
It was a long time ago, and it was just like, well, you know what? We finished Mao-sama. I'm gonna suggest Denki-Gai. I'd never seen Denki-Gai at this point, right? I heard some interesting things online, and I was like, you know what? We're gonna watch it. We're gonna talk about it. And we got to the recording, and Tyson finished the series, done his notes and everything, and it's just me and Kevin. And Kevin knows how strict I can be when we don't take our notes or whatever, or when we don't even finish an anime for kunai. So I feel that Kevin was kind of scared, because literally Tyson asked us right at the beginning, and he was like, oh, so what do you think about, this was actually before we even had a proper episode structure. So Tyson asked us about the ending right at the beginning of the show, and then me and Kevin were just like, ugh, actually we never seen the ending, and Kevin said that first.
No.
And then Kevin said it first, and then I was just like, well, you know what, Kevin's got some balls, because I'm gonna join in on that. I was like, and the funny thing is, Tyson looked at me and Tyson was like, are you gonna you gonna tell him off? Are you gonna? I was about to, and then I was like, well, I'm in the same position as Kevin, so I was just like, yeah, I didn't watch it either. And then Tyson just freaked out, and he was like, you suggested the show. How did you not watch it?
How do you sit down to record for a show and you didn't watch it? You goobers.
This is the thing, right? This is the thing. Now we have a rule on Kunai that we will not suggest the show unless we've seen it once in full. And then we watch it another time for Kunai. So we're learning. This is early days of Kunai. We didn't have a show structure. We didn't have any rules in place to sort of keep us on track. And I think Denki-Gai for us was a very pivotal point because, yeah, we shit on it a lot for Kunai, but it's because we're learning from our past mistakes. And I think that there's a lot of mistakes that we tie towards Denki-Gai and we sort of shit on the anime because of our experience on Kunai, if that makes sense.
So it's not the show's fault, it's your fault, and you're just using the show as a scapegoat.
Correct. That's exactly it. You can ask Kevin about this. Every time we do a bad episode, I'm like, Kevin, I do not want this episode to be like Denki-Gai. We put Denki-Gai in the back of our heads as this is the bottom of the barrel for Kunai episodes. And then it just goes up from that. So if an episode has gone better than our Denki-Gai episode, then we're like, oh, you know what? That's good. The reason why I suggested it today was because it's coming up to be Kunai's anniversary. I think 9 years of Kunai, which is insane. But maybe 9 years or 8 years of Kunai, something that long. I didn't even know that. And then I thought, well, I want to go back and do the episodes that were cancelled, because literally when we did Denki-Gai, we were like 1 hour in, and then Tyson asked, oh, so what do you think of Sommelier-kun? And specifically he asked about episode 11, but we'll get onto that in the thing. And then we're like, we haven't seen it. The funny thing is, I think Kevin got further than me. Kevin got maybe 4 episodes in, and I got 2 episodes in. So I didn't even bother. 2 episodes. And this was back then when we had like a whole month to watch an episode for Kunai. And I'll explain why I got 2 episodes in, and it's because I felt this anime was goofy. Like, I was just like, what the fuck is this? How are we going to talk about the show? Bear in mind, we were all at this point, because it was only episode 11, we were extremely new to anime, and a lot of the things we didn't understand. I didn't understand the setting. I didn't understand the characters as much. I wasn't as prepared because, mind you, we were early days of Kunai. We weren't really taking notes as much. And secondly, I wasn't in that otaku sphere, if that makes sense, right? I wasn't in that environment. I didn't get to be exposed enough.
Okay.
I'm not trying to make excuses, but it was just a train wreck. And I love the way that me and Kevin in the initial episode, we were both separately thinking that we could get away with not watching the anime and let everyone else sort of chip in, if that makes sense.
I've got 2 words for you. Excuse me. Banana hammock.
Banana hammock? You mean like what what the director was wearing?
No, yeah, because you said you got to episode 2 and then you're like, nope, I'm out.
No, it wasn't because of that. You know what it was?
Okay.
It was my initial reasoning, and I can't speak for Kevin, but my initial reasoning was that it felt a bit odd. Like, who does a fan service episode right from the get-go? Like, that I didn't make sense to me, because at the time, we'd expect fan service episodes to be, your beach episode or your bathhouse episode, and that would be like maybe episode 7. You know what I mean? Like later on into the series, when the series is sort of winding down and you need to get that hype build up. So for me, initially, in my initial watch, I was just disappointed. I was like, we don't know these characters, and yet we're having a fan service episode from the get-go. I didn't really care for it at the time, and I kind of felt uncomfortable. That was initially. I'm just going back to how I initially felt. Things have changed since then.
Well, you know what? I'm here now to redeem the Denki-Gai.
You know what? We are all here to redeem Denki-Gai, because I'll be honest with you, my first or my second impressions as I was rewatching for Kunai this time around was very, I would say, positive. I think in my mind, because I was thinking, oh, you know what? Denki-Gai is a shit anime because of our Kunai experience on it. I didn't give it a chance. And the funny thing is, I would go back, because we were supposed to do this episode with Joe as well. But initially when I was watching it for that episode, I also did the same thing. I stopped at like episode 4. I think maybe episode 4 or episode 6. I stopped right there, and I was like, I can't continue with it. But rewatching it now for Kunai has changed me a little bit, because it is wacky, it is great, it reminds me of other shows that I've seen in the past, right? Like Good Luck Girl or Aho Girl as well, stuff like that. And it also reminded me of I'm trying to remember, there was one particular show that it reminded me of a lot that I can't really it reminded me of SYD. I don't know if you know SYD.
Oh yeah, no, that's the show I asked you about the other day. I was like, what's that show you keep telling me I should watch and I haven't seen yet?
Yeah.
so I haven't
It's
seen that one
SYD.
yet.
So it reminded me a lot of SYD, which is funny because we on Kunai really think highly of SYD, right? It's like the funny show, like the peak of comedy for us. And this show has a lot of the same features, a lot of the same, I wouldn't say a lot of the same jokes, but a lot of the same humor as SYD, right? And it's quite nice because we get to see that sort of bookstore environment in Japan, right? Because it's quite unique because you don't quite see dedicated manga stores in the West, or you might do, but they're quite small. Like this store had like what, 7 stories? Like it was insane.
I was just in a book off earlier today. Yeah, which is used book and manga shop.
So like when you went in there, like was it huge? Was it small store? Like what was it?
Oh, the book off? I mean, there's book offs all over Japan. So, which, like, I mean, like the one that near me, it's a larger book off, but even it's only one floor. But like I said, if you go to any like big city in Japan, like almost any of these like bookstores, like, you know, in Denki-Gai, they're almost always multiple floors because they're like themed basically.
See, and that was interesting because in the show I didn't quite understand that initially because I didn't watch the end, because the end episode explains that there are other workers apart from these 6 characters that we see in the show. So for me, I think I couldn't relate to it initially. I didn't have any context because there was a lot of references that I didn't understand. I didn't understand the anime industry at the time, and now watching it for Kunai, I felt refreshed. The show is very refreshing because I understand the jokes. I understand, you know, the manga and anime environment. It's quite interesting because it's like, you know, I was just surprised. Like, I don't know how to explain it. It was very, very refreshing. Like, it's one of those shows that I could say that you could turn your brain off and watch, but that would be an insult to the show. I don't know. I think as a manga fan, as an anime fan, I really did appreciate it. I didn't at first, but now I do.
I mean, that's a pretty good way to say that too, because it's one of those shows though too where you have obviously the visual component, which is the whole point of watching anime. But that being said, this show is very dialogue driven, especially with like a lot of its little jokes and innuendos and things like that,
which I thought was pretty cool. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you, I don't know, it's a show that made me smile, made me laugh, and I haven't seen like that in a while. And for me, it's kind of disappointing that it didn't get as much love. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, well, I wanted to talk about that for a little bit. So, you know, again, as I, you know, started looking more into the show after I realized I was getting into it, like, honestly, the show itself has a high pedigree. Not necessarily from, you know, like I said, like not necessarily just from the author itself, but when I looked into like the studio, how you talked about earlier, I mean, they've been around forever, you know, like, and they've done some of my personal favorite anime that have come out in the past few years, which one we covered not too long ago, which was Sweetness and Lightning, and they also are currently doing TZ Master Takagi-san. That's another one of theirs.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that. Okay.
Yeah. Of course, they do Crown Shinchan, which is hilarious, and it's kind of like, you know, an all ages show. I don't know how many people out there, you know, outside of Japan have watched Crown Shinchan, but I mean, he's huge in Japan. And of course, Doraemon. I mean, Doraemon actually, the new movie like just came out this week and already knocked off the Batman in Japan.
Oh wow,
that's how big it is. Yeah. So anyway, like just that. But then I got into looking into the voice actors. I was like, I know this person. Like as I'm looking at each of their roles, they've been in so many shows that I've personally enjoyed, you know, and other shows that I know of but I haven't watched. I mean, like I said, the cast of this show, like from the staff to the voice actors, is also has its own pedigree. So that's like, again, brings me back to the whole surprise of how I'd never heard about it until, like I said, you suggested it to me.
Wow, that's insane. I didn't even realize that, to be honest with you. And like, one thing that is upsetting is just because it kind of I don't think it did well in manga sales, because I know we don't talk about manga and kunai, but anime is there to promote manga, and it seemed a bit odd to me that we even got that we got an actual release overseas of this anime, because sometimes we don't. But I was surprised that we did, because anime is there to promote manga, but this manga never released in the West.
I'm wondering though too, like, because a lot of times people who are involved in the manga industry, you know, not just in the corporate side, but I mean like the actual creators and stuff like that, they're in like kind of tight circles with a lot of like anime creators creators and artists and things like that too. So I'm kind of wondering if maybe this was just something that kind of got like a word of mouth, or like people took on as kind of like a pet project because of the ties that it obviously has to the rest of the manga and anime world, and all the kind of like little, I don't even want to say inside jokes, because there's a lot of inside stuff in the show that's not even meant as a joke, but like, you know, you'll see shots of characters that, you know, clearly they aren't the character, but they're supposed to represent that character. And like, I messaged you the other day when it got to the, you know, episodes of them doing the cosplay. I'm like, dude, I recognize every single character that they're cosplaying as in this show. Like,
which is, it's very interesting. And you might have a point there, because first of all, how could they get away with all of that? That's one thing. I mean,
there's a lot of people who, you know, like I said, in manga and anime, who are kind of like friends with each other, and they do tributes to each other. This is why you'll see, like, you know, random characters sometimes will pop up in another person's anime in the background, and like you don't really notice them, but then other people will like grab it and post it online. I'm like, oh my god, that was them. You know what I mean? Or like where, you know, like the authors for like ReZero and Konosuba, they're really good friends, and they'll make little inside jokes back and forth in their own properties to each other, and that's why you'll see like different crossovers and promos and things like that with those shows.
Even if we're talking about Konosuba and ReZero, the fact that we got that crossover that had like, I can't remember the name of it, it had like Overlord characters as well, and like Shield Hero
characters. You mean that anime? Yeah, that's all the different Isekai Quartet, where it's all the different Isekai shows together.
That was crazy. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about Denki-Gai. I want to talk about our favorite episodes and moments, because you know what? I'm just going to say it right off the bat. Episode 11, best episode of the show. Best fucking episode of Denki-Gai. And it's a shame that I never watched it initially, because if I had seen episode 11 from the beginning, damn, I would have stuck with Denki-Gai.
But I will say, I am glad that they saved that episode till almost the very end, because like the whole time, like, you know, I wouldn't call Sommelier a main character in the show. Like, he's not a side character, but he's not one of like the main ones they focus on either. But you know, you get him, you know, throughout every episode and things like that. And when you finally see that episode, it really ties everything else together.
That's his origin story,
right? But not just him, but also, I just want to call her G-Man, but it's not G-Man. Erohan, the
Erohan G-Man.
Yeah, that's it. So anyway, like in scene where she came from too, because I mean, you get to see her in, I think it was the very first episode, or maybe the second one.
Yes, I think she appeared in the first episode.
Yeah, and she comes out and she's like, oh, I love dirty books and everything. But then you get to see how she even got into these books in the first place in episode 11. So it really does tie things together.
I don't know. What I liked about it was just the fact that we got to see more of Sommelier, because as a character, he's just so... You want to know more about him, because he doesn't talk, he doesn't do anything like that. And it's just like, for me, those little character development moments are like my favorite episodes. And also, Erohan G-Man is like top notch as a character, just to get that story. I want to get more into it when we get into stories, but in general, like my favorite moments, I would say, would have been comedic moments, but also those sort of cutaway gags that they do. Like, there was this small group of episodes, or it was sort of split across a various amount of episodes, where they did the little story with the cat, Lime Cat 1, Lime Cat 2, Lime Cat 3, the silent movie style. I quite enjoyed that, because it was quite refreshing. It gave you like a little circuit breaker, but it was, I don't know, it's like film noir in a way, because it started off as this sort of, I don't know, like 1900s silent movie, you know, with the quirky music in the background. And then it just became this sort of film noir type situation, like, you know, those like detective movies.
Yeah, and it was so melodramatic.
I liked it. I feel that it could have been put into like Cannes Film Festival. Like, it was that dramatic. It felt like an artsy film in a way, and I liked that. And that was like one of my favorite moments as well, because it meant nothing to the story, genuinely.
But it was just fun.
It was fun. And you know what? Initially, I thought it meant nothing to the story. And then at the end of it, where basically Fugirl goes in for the kiss, and he's sleeping, and he thinks it's the cat licking his face. And I thought, wow, it was a nice way to end it. It was quite nice.
Honestly, I have a lot of favorite moments and episodes. One of the first ones that I can just, I'm sitting here just thinking about it now, like I'm looking at my notes trying to think about, like, the one that always just keeps jumping out at me, and it's a really simple episode though, was episode 5. And the reason it's one of my favorite episodes is pretty much from beginning to end, it just had me laughing like the entire episode.
Well, the panty shot episode.
Yeah, that was one where, like, where Umio was like, the one thing that drives me crazy about your manga is that you don't know how to draw panties properly, or you don't use them properly. He's like, you've got all these skills and you can't draw panties. So then it's them trying to get her in the right mindset of like how to draw panties and everything. And like that kind of also takes me back to, I forget which episode it was, but the one where they go to Hiotan's apartment and Sensei, is getting the laundry for her because she's sick, and like she starts pulling out the lingerie and all that stuff and like going bonkers over it. It's like she just really has no idea like what sexy underclothes are, yet she draws like ecchi manga. So it's a weird little story with her about how she keeps talking about how she wants to make it big and break into the mainstream and become a better manga artist, and she draws ecchi stories and everything, but she doesn't know how to draw sexy stuff. And like the whole running gag through the whole show of them having like the girl power meter with her, and like she keeps going into the negative points because she's just so unsexy herself and everything. It's really funny to me.
No, it's quite hilarious. I mean, those ongoing jokes as well. It's like you'd think that whole girl power joke would stay for like one episode, but
nope.
it's a joke that runs throughout the season, which is fantastic, and it doesn't feel stale at all. They always add to it.
I would say it gets worse or better depending on how you're thinking about it once Sumorin comes into the show.
Okay. Yeah.
She literally starts talking. She's like, girl power meter activated, and like puts her little fingers over her eyes and is like just watching everything and rating everything on the girl power meter. So yeah. So anyway, episode 5 was, one that I just enjoyed it just because it had me laughing from beginning to end. Yeah, it was episode 8 where Sensei and Umio were going to go on the date, and like she's trying to figure out how to, get ready, and she has like the other girls helping her, like get dressed and figure out, how to act and go out on their date. And then like when he finally, sees her, you think that, he's gonna see her and be like, oh my god, you're so pretty or whatever, or just be taken back by her. And he gets mad, and you're like, wait, why is he getting mad? And it's because she took her glasses off. And you find out that not only does he have a glasses fetish, but he's like, you need to wear your glasses all the time. They're like your best feature. And then she ends up getting mad at him. So
it's interesting because I kind of liked that episode until the end, because I was assuming that we would see them on their date, right? I wanted to see that, how their date went. We got no reference of the date afterwards. We didn't know if it went well, if it went badly. It was very disappointing for me, but the episode was good up until that point.
Well, honestly though, that's kind of like a running thing with this show as a whole too. Like I talked back, we were talking about first impressions. I wasn't expecting there to be any, for it to be kind of a rom-com show, and there's multiple like pairings and potential couples all through this show, but it's one of those things that they're just dangling on a string the whole time. And like as an audience, you're sitting here, it's like, would you guys just confess to each other already? Would you guys just go out already? And it's like they get right on like that cliff's edge, that razor's edge, where we think, okay, this is going to be the moment where they finally get into a relationship, and then nothing.
It happens a lot in these types of shows where there are multiple couples and things like that. I think the reason being is because the author wants to keep it open to the viewer, right. But at the same time, it's written in such a way where they've sort of made those pairings in, and we'll talk about that a little bit more with characters and relationships and stuff like that. But yeah, I think they sort of shot themselves in the foot with kind of making this a little bit more rom-com, because that's not the strength of the show.
And that's what I say. So the other episode I want to just talk a little bit about, again, it was just an episode I enjoyed, but at the same time it kind of like tugged on me a bit, was episode 10, which was the second Valentine's episode, so Valentine's and White Day. So like over the course of this whole show, you've gone through, I'm gonna say about a year and a half, maybe
something
maybe
like that.
Yeah, not quite 2 years, but definitely more than a year. So like, so this is the second time during this anime where they have a whole Valentine's Day, White Day thing, and you know they're all trying better, and they're all, you know, feeling like they're on the verge of, like, you know, telling the person that they like them and all that type stuff. And you know, I really liked how more of the characters were given more time to kind of like give it their all and prepare, and like, you know, show them coming up with, like, you know, cooking the chocolates and things like that. And then like I also like I loved Kamiko, and I thought she was absolutely adorable in that episode as well. And then but the one part that made me really sad though too is that was the episode where Sumorin like kind of realized that she was out of the running with manager Kantoku. I can never remember if it was Kantoka or Kantoku. I think it was Kantoku, because
Kantoku.
Yeah,
which his name is not actually given. Kantoku means director. He doesn't actually
that's
have
it. Yeah, and they just call him manager, you know, or director, however you would say it. You know, she finally realizes that, like, because she sees the way that he's acting with Hiotan, that, and like she's actually been helping Hiotan, but then she finally realizes that like there's no chance of them getting back together, and then she starts crying, because I thought she was a sweet character, but I was kind of cheering on him and Hiotan anyway. But anyway, like I said, just that was just a good kind of up and down episode, and like I said, I just really like the efforts that the characters are putting forth.
Yeah, no, it was great. And it's interesting that you mentioned the fact that the show takes course over a year and a half, because I'll be honest with you, the way that it's paced, you don't feel that, and at the same time you don't feel as though time is passing, unless you would have seen both episodes for the Valentine's Day, right? If they didn't include those Valentine's Day episodes, I would not have assumed that time would have passed, right? I wouldn't have thought maybe that they would have been a week have passed, maybe a month, maybe a year, maybe 10 years. It's very unclear apart from those Valentine's episodes. So I kind of appreciated that from like a story structure perspective. I will say this though, the way that the show is structured is very similar to Western cartoons, where you have your A story, your B story, sometimes a C storyline as well, where it's sort of split into 3 separate stories, and somehow in the end they kind of work out and you find out, that these stories were linked. Sometimes that happens, doesn't happen all the time though.
I would say you see it actually during the episode too, like, you know, it'll pop up like the title of, you know, that part of the episode, and it kind of gives you like hints.
Because you don't really see that in anime as well. Like a lot of the time, because they've split it in such a way, it means that each sort of story beat gets like less than 10 minutes, which you could kind of split this show into a weekly series that is like 10 minutes long, right? Something like, I can't understand what my husband is saying. That is a sort of short running series. You could have split the show into that. Would I have preferred it if it was like that? Not really. And I think the reason being is because for this show, splitting it into that 2 or 3 parts works really well, because somehow it makes it feel as though the show is longer than it is, if that makes sense. Every episode that I was watching, I was like, damn, is this only 22 minutes? It felt like an hour, which can be seen as a good thing, can be seen as a bad thing, because at times I was sort of struggling because it was just like, shit, when are we going to get into the good part of the story and not the filler? Like, I've never seen shows that are structured in which you have a filler arc in the middle of an episode. It didn't make much sense to me.
I had a little bit of the opposite feeling, like when I could tell that the episode was about to end, I'm like, oh, it's over already? It felt really fast to me.
To be honest with you, I don't know why I kind of felt like that. It was just the fact that I just felt as though it just dragged on, but not in a bad way. Sometimes yes, with certain episodes, but most of the time I just felt like, wow, there's a lot going on in the episode, but just because of how they structured it.
I mean, that I will agree with. It did feel like, I mean, every episode there was a lot going on, you know, especially when it had the bits like cutting back and forth between, you know, what was going on in the shop or what might be going on at the shop, but then going on in someone's apartment, things like that.
And part of me makes me think that could the show have succeeded a bit more if they had sort of spread it out over 24, no, maybe not 24, but maybe like 18 episodes instead, right? As opposed to, or maybe 15 even, right? Because I just felt as though they were putting on too much, and so we didn't get a lot of information for certain things moving forward. Like, for example, I didn't know this, but we mentioned Kantoku, right? And I think this might be a good transition into characters, but we mentioned Kantoku. It wasn't mentioned why his name is Kantoku. I always assumed that Kantoku was the guy that ran the store. He's not.
Right.
And he's not even in a management position. I thought he was.
He's basically like someone like in America. I don't know if they have it in England, but in America, he'd be considered someone who's like a third key. You're not a manager. You're not an assistant manager. You don't really have like authoritative powers as far as like hiring, firing people, but you can tell people, okay, you need to go do this, you need to go do this, and you do have a little bit of more responsibility to you. So that's kind of like what he was, for his little group or his floor.
Yeah, he's kind of like a team leader, if that makes sense, right? What's interesting is as well is he's just like a regular clerk in the store, and the reason why he's called Kantoku is because, and the reason why he's called director, and it's not, I don't think it's mentioned in the show, but it's because he wanted to be a film director. That's his goal in life. He wants to be a film director. So
I missed that.
I don't think it was mentioned, because it was mentioned for a sensei. Like, the reason they call Sensei because she wants to be a manga artist, and obviously a lot of manga artists, they have that title sensei when they get big, right? So it's that sort of thing. It's like a lot of the characters don't actually have their names. Like even Fugirl, it's not mentioned why Fugirl's name is Fugirl, right? Although if you read the manga, you'll find out what her real name is. Fugirl, because I think it's Rotten Girl, basically, because she's into zombies and gore and stuff like that.
Right.
But that's not mentioned.
Makes sense.
Right? And if you understand Japanese, bam, you'd get that, right? But there's not much sort of explanation in certain things, even with the characters, which I thought if we had more time, we could have understood why Kantoku was named Kantoku, right? And we got it with Sommelier, and I kind of felt like we were going to get it with Kantoku when we see the final scene of the final episode. Yeah. Because it feels like there was more story to be told. And one thing that kind of upset me was at the final episode, and I don't understand why, it kind of made me really upset when I saw it, was when you get the little mascot, and the mascot's basically explaining while the other characters are talking, and there's a black screen, and it's like, it was short, but thank you for supporting Denki-Gai. And I was like, damn. So it made me think that possibly even the author or even the animation team knew that this wasn't going to go far. And especially because this is the first sort of anime project from that author, right? Or the first adaptation to come from that author. So
I believe so.
So it kind of felt sad to me, because it was just like Denki-Gai had a lot more to offer. And it felt as though they weren't given that chance, and that they were just willing to accept, oh, I'll take the 12 episodes. Do you know what I mean? Because clearly there was more story to be told, and you could kind of see that from the ending, right?
And like I was saying, this is why it keeps making me think that there was something going on just within the like manga and anime community to even just get this show made or something like that. Because like, if anyone listens to this episode and then they decide they want to go watch it, do not look into anything before watching the show. Watch it, then go wherever your favorite like aggregate site is for anime information, whether it's My Anime List or Anime Planet or AniList, any of those places, and just look at the voice cast and all the other stuff that they've done. It'll blow your mind.
Which is actually really surprising, because it's like, how the hell did they get all of these people for such a small show?
This is what I'm saying. I'm convinced that there was something else going on behind the scenes with this show. There had to be.
It's interesting that we got to see that, but at the same time, it makes me think that could have got a lot more. And I think that's a perfect place to sort of talk about our characters in the show, because we mentioned already Kantoku and things like that. But I want to know, Will, who is your favorite and least favorite characters in the show?
My favorite character might surprise you, might not, but my favorite character
Can I take a guess?
Go ahead. I would go right ahead.
I have a feeling it's either Kameko or Hiotan.
I hate you.
Is it? Am I right?
It's Kamiko.
And why is that?
Not to like bum anybody out or anything like that, but I just found her extremely relatable. Now, at first, I already started to like her just because I thought she was adorable, and I loved her voice, and I love her voice actress. Again, I didn't know who her voice actress was until a few episodes in. I decided to check it out, and it makes sense because she voices a ton of other characters that I like. But anyway, but then like when it got to, I think again it might have been the same episode I was talking about earlier with the White Day and Valentine's Day. I think it might have been that episode. But anyway, where it was talking about like she was talking about how she was just kind of a loner, how she, you know, likes being around people, but she always has her camera and likes taking pictures and seeing other people happy, but she doesn't want to be like in the pictures and things like that. And like how even though she likes somebody, she knows that someone else likes that same person, so she doesn't want to just be outright and tell the person that she likes them because she doesn't want to get in the way of anything else. She doesn't want to be a bother, things like that, you know. And it really hit hard when she was talking about, like I said, taking pictures and not being in the pictures, because that's kind of like how I was like when I was in like high school and university. I was always like the one when we would go on like, you know, school trips or excursions or study projects that, you know, I always had my camera with me, and people were always like, you know, asking to have me take their picture, you know, and they would line up in groups and all that stuff, but I was always the one taking the pictures, never in the pictures. And then like I've been that person too where it's like I've admired somebody that I've been, you know, not necessarily afar from but not really close from, but then they've always had somebody else and things like that. So like I said, just there's lots of different reasons why I just ended up liking her the most. One, like I said, just because she was very relatable, and two, I just thought she was absolutely adorable.
You know what's interesting about her character is that I remember back in the day when I watched this show, and I remember recording the episode, and I was like, you know what, she is quite cool as a character just because of her character design, the big poofy hair. And I'm like, well, I've got hair like that, I could relate to her in that sense. But upon the rewatch, it was mentioned, and I can't remember who said it, but it was mentioned in an episode. Someone else was talking about it, where basically that she has this sort of cute rodent style. And I was like, shit, they hit the nail on the head, because
with her little mouth and everything.
Yeah, she reminds me of a mouse or a rat. Not in a bad way, in like a cute way. Like she's just small and like I don't know how to explain it. She's just small and like cute, unassuming, but then at the same time kind of gives me like Scrappy Doo vibes, you know, from Scooby-Doo, you know, let me at him, that kind of sort of vibe to her. And it's interesting that you mentioned that. I do agree with you. Like I did really feel upset when I saw her storyline and the fact that, you know, she doesn't feel as though she wants to be the main character, right? And the fact that that sort of affects everything else in her life, right? The fact that she didn't want to be in pictures, she's just a person taking the pictures. Also, she didn't want to confess to Kantoku as well. She was reluctant to give him the chocolates to begin with, and yeah, she didn't end up being with him, but she got the charm, and she kind of felt good about herself. I relate to that a lot.
Well, and she actually did realize that, you know, these people were her friends. She was in with them. She was part of the group, which outside of this little situation, of course, you know, we didn't really get to see anything outside of like this exact situation other than what the characters told us. But like I said, she was always been that outsider, but then she finally realizes, okay, I'm not an outsider. I'm, you know, with them. I'm one of them.
And it's interesting as well, like, to be honest with you, do you have any other favorite characters or other characters that you thought were good?
Like Kameko is my favorite character. I just want to hug her. I want to adopt her and all that type of stuff. But I will say that, like, you know, it's funny, like, not talking about Umio, but I'm just saying that just like him, like, I have like a glasses fetish type of thing.
Okay, all right, well.
I absolutely loved Sensei. Like, I loved her, like, both her good parts and her flaws. Like, I loved, like, when she would, you know, stay up for, like, 3-4 days and get frustrated and go into her baby mode. I thought it was hilarious. She was just, it's weird saying this about, especially a character who's drawn in that kind of slightly, like, chibi-esque style. But I thought that in her kind of plain Jane-ness kind of thing that she had going on, that she was still sexy and cute and funny, and just physically just looks like before she like any mannerisms, opening her mouth, saying anything, just physically she reminded me a lot of Kuroneko. which you know that
Oh,
I
okay.
love Kuro
Yeah,
Neko.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
So I also I loved her actually being a mangaka and like still never giving up on that. Like even though she would cry and get upset, she was like, I didn't get through, you know, when she kept trying to like, you know, get published and all that stuff. But then she was still, you know, making sure to do Comic Cat. Like after they finished the submission that she had to submit and barely got it in at time, and then she ended up still getting rejected, and they were like, you know, well, guess we gotta go to work. She's like, what do you mean? We've got to get back to work in the manga. They're like, what? You still want to keep drawing? She's like, yeah, I gotta get ready for Comic Cat. Or excuse me, they called it comic art, I think.
Yeah, something like that. But it was basically Comic Cat.
Now, you had asked me earlier, though, they're like, who was someone that I didn't like? I can honestly, there wasn't any character that I didn't like.
Okay.
So I really enjoyed this cast.
Now, for me, if I may, I'm just going to go out and say this. My favorite character of the whole show, and I hated this character initially.
Wait, let me guess. Let me try guessing. You guessed for me.
You might be surprised.
I know I'm going to be wrong because I'm not as good at this kind of stuff. All right, I'm going to say that initially you did not like Fu Girl.
You think Fugal is one of my favorite characters? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
You are wrong. Okay.
Oh, God dang it.
When I was watching it originally for Kunai, I hated Erohon G-Man. Fucking hated her.
Oh, okay. At first appearance, though, before you get to see who she really is, I can understand that.
Yeah, and mind you, I only watched like 3 episodes for the initial watch for Kunai, but I respect her a lot. I genuinely do, and that's one of the reasons why episode 11 was like one of my favorites. It's just because of her. You learn her story, you get to sympathize with her, but also it gives context to the previous episodes, right?
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, who else better to do her job than someone like her?
Exactly, because she said, I want to protect it. And she did. And I was thinking, why is Erohon G-Man bringing all this manga that they've confiscated that they're going to destroy? And the reason why she did it, we find out, is because of her origins, right? She was a fan of Ero manga because of Sumiliekan, which was great. And I liked that. It seemed a bit odd, though. I mean, that sort of story arc seemed a bit odd because, they were in elementary school or something? And they were reading, like, Ero manga?
I'm almost positive it said they were 10.
It's a bit dodgy. I'm not gonna lie, it's a bit dodgy, but I get it in a sense. And I thought it was a bit weird as well because, you know, she's a young girl, and I was thinking, what was the reason for her to actually love erotic books, right? Because at the beginning she was like freaked out about it, and then she starts helping. And I think what it is, I don't think she initially loved erotic books. I thought what it is that, you know, because she was class president, I'd imagine that, you know, in her school, people were like, oh, you're goody two shoes. They wouldn't approach her, right? I might be looking too far into this, but I think it's probably the compassion, you know, the acceptance that was given to her by Sumiliekan that sort of made her to love Ero manga. I think initially she didn't like it, but she sort of fell in love with Sommelier. And I think that's probably the reason. And also the fact that Sommelier came in and saved her, right? And also saved her on 2 occasions. Saved her because he took the fall for the Ero manga, and also saved her physically from that, you know, the building that they were destroying. So I really do love her character arc. I really do love her as a character. And the fact that you see her in the beginning and you think, oh, she's quite goofy because it's like, I love Ero books. And oddly enough, I respect her a lot because it takes guts, right? She's a government worker, right? So in theory, if people found out, it's more than likely she could end up losing her job because of it, right? There could be some sort of scandal. You know what I mean, right? Government workers are kind of meant to be quite prim and proper. But she's of some sort of high standing in a sense. At the same time, she has everything to risk, but she still goes out and proclaims what she loves, right? And I respect that a lot because initially I was pretty sort of reserved in what I liked. We had this kind of conversation on the Oremo episode, right? Where I will go out openly and say, I watch anime, I read manga, you know, I'm into doujins, that kind of stuff, right? I'm very open about that. And I know a lot of people aren't. And I think seeing Erohon G-Man gives me hope, and I think gives hope to other people watching that, you know, it's not weird to be a fan of eroge. It's not weird to be a fan of BL manga. It's not weird to be a fan of anime or manga in general.
I don't hide any of that stuff here. Now, some people do get surprised, like when I tell them, like when I meet, you know, new people in the schools, or if I'm talking with like some of my students, and, you know, like, you know, sometimes like, because they use Chromebooks at my school, and like in between classes, the kids are on there watching like, you know, Hololive on YouTube, or they're watching clips from anime, or looking up pictures of their favorite anime and manga characters, and like I'll go by, and if I recognize them, like, oh, that's blah blah blah, and they're like, huh, you know this? I'm like, yeah.
Which it's I think it's also like, I don't know, it's different in Japan than it is in the UK, because I was having this conversation with Kevin when we were talking about Orimo. It's that if you go out and you openly say, I like anime, I like manga, you get shunned, because people have this sort of disposition, they have this idea in their head that when you say I like anime, they're like, oh, hentai? And I'm like, well, yeah, in its own time, but I'm talking about anime, dude. You don't need to like sexualize it in a sense, right? So people always think when you say I like anime or I like manga, they always think of you as like this weird pervert. Like, that's the feeling I get. And like I said, I do respect Erohon G-Man, because literally her name, we don't actually get revealed her name. Her name is Erohon. Erohon means erotic books, right? G-Man obviously refers to the fact that she's a government worker. So she's basically, I don't know, she's the book porn agent of the government, if that makes sense. She's like the FBI, but for like ero books. It's weird.
And that's why I'm saying she was perfect for this job too, because it's like she goes in with the pretense of protecting, you know, potentially like children or underage people from accidentally discovering, you know, dirty books, because sometimes like it's really one of those instances where you can't judge a book by its cover, because sometimes like a hentai doujin on the cover will look just like a normal like manga, especially if it's something that's set in like, you know, a fantasy element or action adventure element. You really can't tell until you open the book. And that's like, I think they even had it happen in one of the episodes with, not with her, but one of the other characters is like, oh, these books got mixed up, they've got to go here because they're an adult book. And she was like, oh, they've got to go in the 18 over section. Okay.
It's great that you mentioned that, because with her and her Erohon experience, she would know as she walks into the store, this is not safe for work, this is safe for work, and that's great.
The whole reason I was bringing that up, I got myself sidetracked there, was because in essence, it's like not only is she protecting an unattended audience, but she's protecting the books too. Because what if that situation did come up? A kid grabs that book, they get out of the store with it, that store's gonna get in trouble.
Yeah, true. And as you said, she is the protector of the Ero books, right? It makes sense. One thing that I will say is, what kind of freaks me out though, is that she was exposed to it at such a young age. You know, being 10 years old, I've heard like this sort of meme in like anime and manga where, you know, like the Ero book, like the sort of porno mags that are in forests. You know what I mean? Or like by the river or something like that. Like people like go and throw those books away because they don't want to be associated with them when they sort of use them. And like kids that are wandering just find them. And that's what was going on. And I'm like, is this common in Japan? Because this is not something that happens in the UK. And I think one of the reasons is because porn is just so accessible, right? But is this something that actually happens in Japan? Like kids just randomly finding pornos? Because that's a bit weird.
That part I don't actually know. It's nothing that I've ever personally seen or whatever. I'm betting in more populated areas or bigger cities, sure, I could definitely see it, because like how you say it, it's definitely more accessible. I mean, I could, you know, walk right over here to the 7-Eleven by my apartment right now, and right next to the manga section is the magazine section, and there's just nudie books right there. I mean, and like there's a shelf, it's kind of like underneath that area where that has the bigger books, and right next to like Shonen Jump is like adult manga in the same type of format. So it's very, very accessible here. Now, I will say they've started to change that a little bit, kind of like how in other countries where maybe like a nudie magazine, it might be like kind of like sealed or wrapped in plastic or have like a band around it, things like that. Some titles have started doing that, but otherwise, like you can walk into a store sometimes and it like this. I still remember the first experience I had when I came to Japan. I remember it was like late at night and I had the munchies. I was staying at a hotel. We were still going through training for my job and everything. I walked down to Family Mart, and here, just standing in the middle of the store, is this old man just standing right at the book rack, holding a nudie magazine up, you know, looking at it right there where anyone walking by could see what he was looking at.
Which is kind of weird in a way. Like I said, I mean, you do have that in the UK, but that's sort of been phased out. Like back in the day, they used to have like The Sun, and like there's certain newspapers that would like, you know, have like page 3, which is basically where you'd find all your topless pictures and stuff. That doesn't exist anymore, and I'm glad it doesn't exist, because it's like it's pretty weird that you could just buy a newspaper and there's just nudity in it. It just, to me, it seemed a bit odd, but I didn't know that it was still a thing in Japan. So for me, in a way, it was a little bit of a culture shock. And I was thinking, like, why are these kids just randomly finding pornos, as if it's like, you know, like there's some sort of American TV shows from the 80s, right? You know, like those ones where they go into a forest and they find like a bag of just like Playboys. You know what I mean? Like that's like that sort of meme that sort of existed for like such a long time, and it's just like Japan still has that. It seemed a bit odd to me.
I'm sure that it still kind of exists in some regards, but like I said, I can't personally attest to any experience with that.
But yeah, like I said with Erohon G-Man, I think initially her love for Ero books came from Sommelier, right? The fact that she had a crush on Sommelier and she was falling in love with Sommelier, I didn't think she had interest, because logically speaking, what 10-year-old girl will have an interest in Ero books? It seemed a bit odd to me. I mean, yes, I mean, those, let's be real, like those kind of boys, yeah, like in essence, not all of the boys are like that, but the fact that they were getting together, watching, like reading magazines, kind of, it seemed odd to me, because it's like growing up, I never had that experience, nor do I wanted to have that experience, you know what I mean? So, like I said, I think Erohon, the way that she kind of came in was a great character, and the fact that we're gonna get her revelation and her origin as well as Sommelier, which was great. I mean, it kind of reminds me of, you know, the episode, the Christmas episode, when she hands over the porno books, right? The Ero books, the Ero manga.
You mean when she was dressed as Santa riding a motorcycle?
When she was dressed, exactly, when she was dressed as Santa Claus. And the way Sommelier takes off the mustache and puts it on himself, in my head, I was like, is there something between Sommelier and Erohon G-Man? And at the end of the anime, when it's revealed, like, oh, Sommelier invited her to the picnic. And it was just stuff like that. It was just like, oh, okay, cool. So we got that revealed to us. And in terms of other characters, my least favorite, do you want to know who my least favorite is? You've already mentioned her. It's Fugal. I can't stand her. She's fucking annoying. I'm sorry.
I mean, I didn't hate any of the characters, but I can understand people not liking her. But, you know, believe me, after you've worked in job like what I've had, it's like you're just like, whatever, you're a dumb kid.
You know what it is? I felt that kind of she was used as a pawn in this game of chess, in a sense, right? Because her story basically revolves around the fact that she likes zombies, but her actual true purpose is that she's like, oh, I've got a crush on Sommelier-kun. That was her only existence. And I thought you could have done a lot more with a character like Fugal, right? You got to see quite a lot of her in the beginning, and, you know, her love for zombies and the fact that she's bringing out those guns. I was like, oh my god, she's badass. And then it got to a point where, you know, she's delusional, clearly, right? You see that there's a lot of things that are going on with her as a character. I'd imagine that she's someone that doesn't have as many friends because of her interests. I'm not one to speculate, but I kind of got that vibe. And the fact that, you know, she's hanging out, she's 16 years old, so she's probably working as a part-timer, and she's hanging out with people that are in their 20s, some in their 30s, right? It makes sense. You know, she's an innocent girl, and obviously she does have a crush on Sommelier, and I like how Sommelier handles it. I wouldn't say he's oblivious to it, but he kind of doesn't want to take it further, right?
He's very, very protective of her, though.
Yeah, he is. And I think it's more like a brother-sister relationship as opposed to boyfriend-girlfriend, which makes sense because he doesn't see her that way, but he's not like flat out like rejecting her. You know what I mean? Like he's letting her down easy because he knows it's not appropriate, right? And he knows that it's just a crush, and because there's really no need for her to really like him, because she doesn't really know him. He doesn't talk. Yes, he's very impressive in the sense that he does give these amazing sort of manga suggestions and things like that, but other than that, there's not real much reason. That's why I would say it's more like, you know, your sort of childhood crush, if that makes sense. So
it did kind of give a little bit more of a simple aspect to the show, because like I said, you had, you know, your quote-unquote main pairings with, you know, Hiotan and Kantoku, and then Umio and Sensei, you know, like their whole, you know, will they, won't they type of thing. And then, you know, when it brings in, you know, Sumori, and kind of adds like a third wheel dimension to that too. But then you have just the more just simple, straightforward stuff with Fu Girl and Sommelier that is kind of like palate cleanser between the other relationships.
Look, for me, well, I'm going to have to disagree with you there, because it's not a palate cleanser, because a palate cleanser for me would have been no relationship at all. For me, it felt forced because every character in the show is paired with someone, at least, or every character that's in the show likes someone, and it kind of gets really messy, and it's just like, I don't want Fugal to have a crush on Sommelier and try and go for Sommelier. Like, for me, it did not make any sense. There was no real reason behind it. Yes, it was this sort of cute little high school crush, and sometimes sometimes they don't make sense, but at the same time, Will, it felt forced because every other character is in some sort of will they, won't they relationship. And you know from the beginning that this is a one-sided relationship, right? Because we know Sommelier doesn't like her.
Does that mean any like high school girl that, you know, has a crush on an older man that, you know, in a story that it's a forced, you know, story element? I don't think so.
I'm not saying that, but I felt it was forced because of the fact that every other character in the show has some form of crush or some sort of relationship. Do you see what I mean? Why is it that this show has, and this is something that I really want to get into a little bit later on, why is it everyone in the show has a love interest? It shouldn't be like that.
I'm giving my full Ron Burgundy, you know, gesture here with my pen and everything. It's like, I don't agree with you.
Okay. and we can talk about that after we talk about the rest of the characters.
You asked me, so I have to ask you. So you did have a character you didn't like, you know, and a character you do like. Was there any other characters that you liked, just maybe not as much?
So yeah, I mean, the other characters that I did enjoy, I enjoyed all of them. The other ones, I would say Sommelier, really liked him because of his story arcs and the fact that you got a lot of content, surprisingly, with Sommelier. Initially, you got the suggestions. He doesn't talk, but he's a very well developed character, especially in the scenes where, you know, those silent movie scenes, right? You got to see a lot about him. You got to see that he's very caring, that he's, you know, loving, that he wants to help people. I really do appreciate characters like, I really do like Hiotan because she's sort of this ditzy character, but at the same time, she does want to help, and she does, I don't know, like, she's very awkward, right? She doesn't know what to say. She doesn't know what to do.
I really wanted to talk about her. That's why I was bringing it up, just because, like, I'm right there with you. She's like, she's your ditzy sweetheart, you know, of the show. But she's very deceptive, if you know what I mean.
I don't know what you mean, so care to explain that?
I'm being naughty here. You know, obviously with episode 2, I didn't realize, you know, that she was like the stacked one of the bunch until episode 2. And I was like, wait a minute, where did this come from? Like, after they had like the whole water gun thing and she's laying there twitching on the ground, I'm like, why are they doing this? Just feels so awkward.
And you know what? That's one of the reasons I fucking hated that episode, because it just felt gross. I wanted to take a shower. I was like, what the fuck is this? There's ways of doing fan service, and then there's just absolute porn like this. No,
so bad to me because she's so sweet. She is just a butterball.
No, you know what, like that episode, like, you could take scenes out of context and make a video. If you showed it to someone, people will assume that's a hentai, because that scene where she's twitching, that was fucked up. I did not like that. And I'll be honest, there's certain things I did like about it, like the egg and spoon race with the waifus. that was hilarious. But at the same time, it was just that moment, it felt gross. It was like, what the fuck is this? I absolutely hated it. And I was like, why is her swimsuit like ripped and shit? I was like, what the fuck? Like, no, it was bad.
Getting off of that, I know we're talking about characters here, but it just made me remember, like, one of my favorite other episodes in the show was the one with her and Kantoku in her apartment and having the cold and her passing out and him having to take her to the hospital and all that stuff. That episode was awesome.
Yeah, that episode was awesome. And I think one of the other reasons it was awesome was because we got to see more of Hiotan in that setting, right? And she's really like reserved in the sense she doesn't want Kantoku to come in. She didn't want him to sort of worry about her, but at the same time he was worried. I mean, it's very clear that he has feelings for Hiotan, but you know, the moment that she basically passed out, he knew something was wrong. He kicked down the fucking door.
Yeah.
And the fact that he was a gentleman in the sense that, look, I can't leave you in this sort of...
I would say that was awesome.
Even though she lives in a good area, right? Her apartment building looks a bit shoddy. He didn't want to leave her alone, right? To the point where, you know, because something could have happened to her. You know, the door was wide open. Anything could have happened. She could have got robbed. She could have got murdered. Whatever. So...
I would say, I know this could sound like something like really simple, and they do it in other anime, but this to me was just a little bit different, was when, you know, he decided to cook for her too, but they made sure to show that when he was cooking, he was like cooking, like chopping vegetables, chopping meat, you know, checking what he was making while he was cooking it. Because like a lot of times they'll show these things in anime where a character gets sick and another character's like, I'm gonna take care of you, and then they just like go to the supermarket or go to, you know, the kombini, and they get the most simple, like, you know, rice porridge and things like that, you know, something they can just heat up, you know, in like a heat pack or, you know, in the microwave and stuff like that. But like, I like it added that extra touch of that kind of caring feeling, I guess you could say, because he was taking his time to actually cook a good meal for her. And when they finally sat down to eat, and she was like, oh, this is good.
Yeah, the funny thing is that even when he's preparing the ingredients, right, he's asking her, oh, do you like shiitake mushrooms and stuff like that. But there was a thing about the ginger. You see him chopping up the ginger, right, and he puts it in there, and he's clearly very considerate because, right, he knows that, okay, ginger's quite good if you have a cold or a flu or whatever, and it's really good for the immune system. So he put that in there and he mentioned it to her because it just makes sense. Like he has this sort of caring aura, right? Because we mentioned that Hiotan is the sort of mother of the group, right? Because she's there and she helps out Sensei when she's in baby mode, that kind of stuff, and she has this sort of motherly sense, motherly aura. But oddly enough, Kantoku has the same aura but in a different sense, right? You know what I mean? Like you have that motherly sense of love, like, you know, when you know you're upset and your mum hugs you, but you also have that sort of when you're really down in the dumps and your mum makes you your favorite meal, that kind of feeling. That was the sort of vibe that I got from Kantoku.
I said that's a really good comparison, actually.
That's the thing. At the same time, Kantoku can be a bit of a creep. Yes, sometimes you get it as a joke, but then there was this moment, I don't know, he keeps on whispering in her ear like, why are you so defenseless? I got thrown off a little bit by that because there were moments in which it kind of felt that he was going to take advantage of her. I felt it the most when they were in like a YMCA. You know what I mean? When they were in that sort of building. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Oh, you mean after the comic market when they went to the like hot bath area?
No, when they were in the hostel.
It was like a net cafe, is what they would call it.
Yeah,
like here.
something like that. And for me, I got grossed out because he says it again. Okay, the first time, he's trying to do it to tease her, but then the second time, maybe it's because he was sleep deprived. I don't know if that's an excuse, and even if it was, that's not an excuse. But he goes in and he's like on top of her, and she says, well, the Kantoku that I know wouldn't do that. And I'm like, fuck me, like what the fuck just happened? You know, she's saying something and she's taking a bet that he wouldn't assault her, but at the same time, to me, it didn't feel like he's going in to sort of do anything good. Like it felt like he was trying to take advantage of her, and I could not respect that, nor could I appreciate that. So there is two sides of the character.
I didn't view that harshly. Like I said, the only episode that I kind of felt like awkward like that was second episode, like you said, but rest of it, I didn't take it like that. I think it was just him, pushing buttons and, seeing how she would react.
Maybe that could be, but at the same time, it felt a bit like it got past that point for me and it entered creepy territory. Speaking of creepy, we'll talk about characters who aren't creepy. Umio. You know what? Umio is your typical harem protagonist. Does not know what the fuck is going on. Why is he like that? Clearly, he knows that Sensei likes him. Or maybe he doesn't know that. Well, the thing is, he doesn't know that Sensei likes him. He likes Sensei. I think he likes Sensei on multiple levels, right? He respects Sensei as a mangaka, but at the same time, over time, he actually sort of falls in love with Sensei, and he's incredibly awkward. And you see that with the whole lying on the lap, where he sort of makes these weird sounds. And I get it. Sometimes you kind of feel a bit sensitive when someone touches you. You know what I mean? And it does feel a bit awkward. Like if someone I didn't know was to touch my arm, I would get really, not freaked out. I'd be really like, I'd feel like, what the fuck?
It's funny because of the fact that like he works with her and he likes her as a friend, he likes her more than a friend, but he also is like a fanboy because he loves manga and doujinshi, and like he's like ravenous about different artists and creators and things like that. Like even like people he knows from the past, people like he's worked with, things like that. Like for instance, when Sumori comes back in and he starts fanboying over her, but he knows her. It's really weird.
He reminds me a lot of Keima from God Only Knows, Keima Katsuragi.
Yeah.
Because he has the knowledge of all of these games and light novels. Let's be real, he has a similar design to him, and I don't know if that was intentional, but the amount of fucking knowledge this guy has in his head for like visual novels and the amount of love that he has for these 2D characters, I appreciate that. I appreciate the guy. I gotta have respect for the guy. I'll be real with you.
I would say it's funny how he like kind of tries to use knowledge from like eroge games in real life.
The fact that it doesn't work, because it works with Keima in God Only Knows because that's how the show is, but it does not fucking work with him. And you see a lot of the characters get bored by him. Every time he's talking about I've been playing this game or I've been doing that, the characters are sleeping, and it's quite hilarious. And I find that can also be the downfall of his character, the fact that he's just basically often used as a punching bag for jokes. right? Or in general, a punching bag for Fugal. And that's one of the reasons I didn't like him, because of the way that Fugal treats him. And he's just too nice as a character, right? He doesn't really stand up for himself. He doesn't defend himself. But I want to talk about Sensei, because Sensei is a very important character. I would say the two most influential characters in the show are Hiotan and Sensei. It's very clear even from the OP, because at the end of the OP, when they're sort of holding the apples, in the first half of the anime, it's Hiotan that's holding the apple, and in the second half of the anime, Sensei that's holding it at the end.
I noticed that.
So it's quite interesting, because in a story's perspective, you've got the first sort of half of the anime is sort of dedicated to Sensei, more Sensei based plots points, and then you have Hiotan in the beginning of the OP, and then when it switches, you kind of have more Hiotan story, but it's Sensei holding the app. That's besides the point. What I like about Sensei, I do like her character designer, and I will hit on that point that she reminds me a lot of Kuroneko.
Exactly like I said.
The character hairstyle, the way that it's sort of highlighted, the color as well.
The tracksuit jacket.
Yeah, there's so many different combinations, but in terms of her personality, she's nothing like Kuroneko.
No.
The comparison sort of stops at like appearance, right? But what's very interesting about her is that she's your typical dork. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
I don't know how to explain it. Like if you watch a lot of 90s American TV shows, you know, or like, I don't know, there was that one show where I can't remember what it was. Was it like She's All That? It was like a film, wasn't it? Like the dorky girl that goes out with like, is it
It's the
She's All
makeover.
That?
Yeah, She's All That.
When I saw that, it reminded me of that. She has that sort of vibe to her, and there's nothing wrong with being a character like. In fact, it's a very human character, because I've met a lot of people who are, for lack of a better term, dork, right? Because I was like that when I was in high school, and I mean, it's a very sort of high school trope. But before I started this podcast, I was quite reserved, and I kept my secrets to myself. And the fact that she has this sort of pen name that she goes under, right? And that no one really knows what she looks like, other than going to events like Comiket and stuff, where she's actually there in person. But it kind of reminds me of myself. Like, no one knows what I look like. I mean, a fair few people do, but it's only when I go to physical events that people get to see me, if that makes sense. I kind of related to her quite a lot. I think what kind of put me down a little bit was her storyline. As funny as it was with the whole girl power thing, I was a little bit disappointed by it, right? Because, and I think the redemption kind of came from the cinema scene, right? Where basically Umio reveals that, you know, you don't need to be anything that you're not. I like you for who you are. And, you know, I like the fact that, you know, this girl that has glasses, and you know what I mean? And yes, Umio did mean it in a little bit of a pervy way, but his essence was quite pure in the sense that, look, I like you for who you are. And it's great, because not all human beings and not all women are, you know, traditionally sort of feminine, right? In a traditional sense, right? And it's great because she is a very human character. And that's one of the reasons I also like the show, is that you get to see an insight of a range of different characters, all of which have their own quirks and all of which represent different members of society. I do like that about her. I do find at times that her annoyingness comes in when she comes into baby mode. Like, I get it. She's very sleep deprived, and, you know, sleep deprivation does do that to you. One thing I don't like about her as well, and it's not something that I hate about the character, but something I kind of feel a bit odd about, and I did mention it in our original episode of Kunai, she is fucking gross. I'm sorry, like, whether you're a guy or a girl, I genuinely don't appreciate people who don't have basic hygiene. She kind of reminds me, like, when you go to an anime expo and all you smell is BO and sweat, and like anime fans can't don't take care of their hygiene. Like, there's always that meme that goes around. She is an embodiment of that, if that makes sense. You know, yes, she's this cute girl, right? But at the same time, she's a disgusting otaku in a sense. You know what I mean? Like, she's a gross otaku. She doesn't really take care of herself in that sense. She said that she was gonna take a shower, but all she did was she washed her hair in the sink, and she like wiped herself down with like wet wipes, and she, what was it? Put deodorant, and then she sprayed her clothes with Febreze. Like, what? Like, I can't it's not like I can't respect a character like that, but I felt that if I met someone like that in real life, it would be very repulsive. Like, I don't like seeing stinky people. She doesn't look like she stinks, but getting that information, it's kind of, it's nasty.
I 100% understand this, and yeah, I'm the same way too. I don't like people like that either. Like, I mean, if you smell, you smell type thing. But I will say, like, in her defense, as far as like, you know, kind of like plot of story and everything, it's like basically it was like the one thing she kind of cut out of her life to make time for basically staying up for 3 and 4 days straight working on her manga.
Yeah, I get that, and in a sense it is quite admirable, but it's basic human hygiene. Like, don't be gross.
Have you ever seen that like, it's not a meme, it's a real picture, but the guy that makes One Piece, like that picture of him from like the like mid 90s or whatever in his apartment?
No.
Oh, you've never seen it? Yeah, it's
I've
him
never
like
seen that.
oh yeah, it's him like laying on the floor with like a ratty white t-shirt and jeans on, playing like Super Famicom on the like the TV on the floor, the consoles on the floor. There's like the meme that you see, or trope I should say, you see in anime where people will just have like trash bags like tied up all around their apartment. It's like that. He's got clothes and clutter just tossed everywhere, and he's literally laying down in a pile of filth, you know, with like a sketchbook next to him and like cigarettes and empty coffee cups and playing video games on a TV on the floor.
That kind of sums up Sensei, because even seeing the show, the clothes that she wears underneath her tracksuit, she wears like the same t-shirt every day to the point where the pattern on the t-shirt is faded. I don't know, she just seems like a gross character. Like, I just have a feeling that she stinks. Like, I know it's really bad, but she seems gross. Like, I can't handle that. Like, for me, my pet peeve is people that don't have hygiene. I'm sorry, it's not difficult. And if you're listening and if you haven't taken a shower, this is your sort of daily reminder to go and take a shower, you filthy pig. Okay, that's what I'm saying to those anime fans, because I know that there's a lot of anime fans that don't take care of themselves from a hygiene perspective. I don't care about what you do, what you're into. I don't care about that. I care about your personal hygiene. Go and take a shower right now. That's all I'm gonna say.
Now, I will say, like, of course, like I said, this picture was like really old, so like, of course, now is like, you know, he's much nicer and everything, but I think it's just one of those things that they roll with as a trope in anime, because like when people are first starting before they get big, they're just constantly working, so they just have like no sense of, like you said, hygiene or health or cleanliness.
I really want to touch briefly on relationships between characters, specifically the thing that you brought up before with Fugao and how you felt that, you know, because I disagreed with you, but I wanted you to sort of talk about that a little bit more, because it's quite interesting, because I felt in general that her relationship with Sommelier-kun seemed a bit forced, and I felt that the better pairing for Sommelier was and will always be Erohon G-Man, because of their backstory together. So what do you kind of think of that?
I mean, I would definitely agree that they would be potentially a better pairing. I just thought, like, you know, Fu Girl's relationship with him is just being your simple teenage puppy love that, you know, and like he's not reciprocating that, but he does still care for her and want to protect her. And that's one thing that you kind of see with him in like the flashbacks, stuff like that. He's just a generally caring person. He wants to protect people. Or like even in the modern time with him helping people find the manga that really is gonna, you know, touch them and, you know, get to them. He just wants to see people happy, you know. So I thought it was innocent, long story short.
No, I get that 100%, but what I'm saying is it needed? Because I felt that it cheapened Fugao's character a lot. That's just my opinion, because you saw quite a lot of her from the first sort of 2 episodes, and she was very motivated and she was this and that, but I felt that it felt a bit tacked on, and it felt as though, why does everyone in this anime need to have some level of romantic entanglement, even with Kamiko, right? I understand her reasoning, and I understand that, you know, she's that character there from the sidelines, and she's, you know, she doesn't really feel a part of the group until, you know, it's sort of revealed to her. But at the same time, it's like, why does she need to have a crush on Kantoku, for example? Like, I don't get that, because it turned the whole love triangle, because there was initially that love triangle between Sumorin, Kantoku, and Hiotan, right? There's that love triangle, but then now you're introducing Kamiko in there, and it feels like more of a square, and love squares, to what I know, don't really exist. It felt more,
well, like you said, it might have just been something too that was like, maybe there were plans for something like that to develop down the road that they just, you know, didn't ever get to because, you know, the manga ended, or it, you know, it could have just been something again that was just a, you know, another simple thing like Fu Girl and Somalia. Like, I don't really think it took anything away from the story.
Just because it doesn't take away from the story, it doesn't add anything either. So I don't understand why.
And that I'll disagree with too, because at the same time, it's one of those things too where like you get little hints with Kamiko through the series where, you know, of her kind of, you know, being like an outsider, but you never really kind of understand why and everything until like like you finally find out that she does, have a thing for him, and wants to, like, give him the Valentine's gift. And it was just one of those things about her just even knowing that, she didn't have a chance, but overcoming her own, like, little fear, not just of rejection, but just like fear of, like, maybe no longer being able to, be a part of that group because of, her maybe even confessing in any sort of way. So it just kind of built up to that part. I mean, I definitely think it added, but it's one of those things where you really kind of, needed to pay attention from the start in order to get that.
But the thing I have concern with is that what was her motivation behind this crush? Do you see what I mean? It's not revealed that to you, right? Because we understand why Hiotan.
I don't think it's something that we also always need. Sometimes people just like people because they like them.
I get that, but it seems very stupid because we have the same sort of thing with Fugirl and we're having the same thing with Kameko. I get that, but at the same time, it's like, where did that originate from? Because we get answers to everything else, right? With Sommelier and Erohon G-Man, we got the same thing with Sensei and Umio. We got the same thing with Hiotan and Kantoku. So it just feels like these two characters, and these are the only two characters that I feel that, okay, I understand that, yes, in a sense that it does drive the story a little bit, but it's not necessarily needed. Like, sometimes it feels as though that the author wanted everyone to have a crush or have some form of a romantic relationship, and this show is not for that. That was my main concern.
I think you're just looking into it a bit too much, in my opinion.
Possibly other people will agree with me, but this show, although it is listed as a romantic comedy both on Crunchyroll and when you actually go and check the manga, I would say it's more of a slice of life, as opposed to a rom-com.
I mean, it's definitely comedy and slice of life. I like I said, it has rom-com elements, but I wouldn't consider it a rom-com at all.
And I think that's very misleading, and I think the fact that there was all of these romantic relationships that were teased or going on sort of toned it down for me. It took away from all the comedy that was going on. It was sweet, don't get me wrong, but it's like it wasn't what I was expecting from the show. I don't know if you have anything more to sort of say on characters, but I really do want to get into, the art style and animation, if I may.
Okay, go ahead.
The one thing that I did notice is that this show, because it's a comedy, and we've seen this in other shows like Gintama and like Good Luck Girl and things like that, is that there's an incredible amount of references to other anime, and it might go back to the point where you're talking about that there must have been something going on in the back end where there's a lot of different animation teams and different people that wanted to have their references put in there. But you see references to Dragon Ball Z, right? You see references to Doraemon and what was it, Doraemon and Shin-chan, because there are moments in which literally that you see Hiotan being drawn as Shin-chan, which I thought was incredibly very interesting. But at the same time, there's just so many different references to different shows. I can't remember all of them off to the top of my head, but when they were cosplaying at the end, right, there was references to Mao-sama and I can't remember Yuri or whatever. Yeah, SAO as well. There was a lot of references, and I thought it was quite nice. And I think possibly is that a reference, like, for example, Yuri, right? There was a reference to that because if I'm not mistaken, Sensei was dressed up like Akari-san, which I thought was pretty cool as someone who is a fan of that show. But it's just very interesting that they have all of these references in place. Yes, I will say that, even references to the actual show's manga. Like, the show is very fourth wall breaking in a sense, because I don't know if you've noticed this, but there's a point where they're filling up manga on the shelf and Hiotan is picking up a manga, and literally the manga is the Denki-Gai manga where she's on the front cover, and I was like, how the hell is she not realizing this? But it's nice nods to different manga and different things like that, which I think was pretty cool. I also quite like the fact that they actually produced, like, you'll actually see this at the end of the show, they actually produced all of the different manga covers that was featured in the show, which I thought was pretty cool as well. There's like these little nods and things like that. But other than that, the art style was pretty cute. It's this sort of chibi style to the characters that you've seen in like other shows, but it's quite unique because I don't think I've ever seen a show that has character design like that, if that makes sense, right? Like, the characters have big heads, but it's not in a childlike way. It's like, I don't know, it adds to the cuteness of the characters, it adds to the goofiness of the characters. It also allows for these sort of cutaway gags in which you can change the animation style, or you could sort sort of tone it down or make it more comedic. And I think the art style was one of my favorite things in the show.
That's why I had to double check what studio even did this, because I like at first glance I was like, is this a Doga Kobo show that I didn't know
I was
about?
thinking the same thing. It has that sort of Doga Kobo style, and it's like it sort of freaks you out like when you see the actual studio that does it, and you're like, shit, man, I know that they're a pedigree studio, but like, damn, like they know how to make a show look good, because even the characters, they're quite detailed, but not detailed in the things that you would expect. Like, for example, like in terms of the hair, in terms of the eyes, in terms of facial expressions, in terms of teeth even, right? And it's not like their teeth are like realistic, but you know, you notice it with Fuga, she has shark teeth, right? Or you notice it with Sensei's hair is very shiny, and yes, it's mentioned that Sensei's hair is black, it looks a bit more blue, but the way that her hair looks is just pretty phenomenal, right? It looks good. It's very hard to explain. It looks good, but then you look at her outfit works well as well, you know what I mean? It's so all of these different pieces, like even though if you really want to zoom in, if you really want to nitpick, there's certain things that don't have the best artwork behind it or don't have the best animation. Like, for example, her costume, going back to Sensei, the zips, if you focus in on the zip of her costume, it looks like a child has drawn them, and like things like that don't need to be detailed, if that makes sense. Like, you're not going to gain anything from getting the zip looking realistic, do you know what I mean? But it looks like, you know, because the studio is quite small, I mean, they work on like certain shows, it looks like they've focused on particular points that will draw your eye and not things that aren't going to. And the fact that the show is sort of set in maybe 2 or 3 settings, right? It's set in the manga store, and then you get to see other people's houses. You don't get to see a wide variety of scenes or wide variety of spaces, and I think that's a good thing. And I think the reason being is because it is a small studio, and that they can focus on making the smaller details a lot more surprising, a lot more eye-catching, which I think bravo on that point, because it's rare. Because sometimes you see anime from smaller studios and it's just like dog shit because they don't have, you know, the time to spend, and they don't have the resources. I would say they're not managing their resources well, but you could see this studio is, you know, Shin-A Animation is doing a great job of that. There's not one point in the show where I thought, oh, you know what, this animation's really bad.
Not just with the characters, but like, you know, and I think I brought this up, you know, when we did our new game episode too, is like, I'm one of those people that I'll notice like background things and things like that too. And even though the backgrounds here weren't as detailed, there was still, you could still tell what everything was. Like, you could see like things like rolled up scrolls of paper, and like the way that the boxes, you know, were stacked and disheveled and creased and things like that, you know, like little like scratches and dents on walls. And like I said, in the store itself, I mean, it looked just like the real life store. I mean, when they would do the panned out shots of Akihabara, it looked like Akihabara, you know, and like even like the sign that said Unimate, which was supposed to represent, you know, Animate, it looked just like it, you know. And then like the episode where they went to the competitor store, I don't remember what the name was during the show, but you could clearly tell it was supposed to be Melon Books. Like, everything was just accurate.
And there's that incredible attention to detail. But yeah, even then, like, even the animation I think was quite smooth. You don't really expect like proper animation. This isn't a shonen show, so you're not expecting like 60 frames a second all the time, do you know what I mean? But it was still quite fluid. There wasn't anything for there to be dropped frames or anything like that, because there's no action going on in the show. But you know, there were, even in the more emotional scenes, even in the more dramatic scenes, I didn't notice, you know, any sort of dodgy animation or any sort of dodgy skipped frames or anything like that. So, you know, like I always say on Kunai, if I don't notice the animation, then it's good animation, right? If it's something that I will nitpick on, then you know it's bad, because I don't think that there was even 3D animation in the show, was there?
Not that I could tell. I mean, if they did use it, it was obviously hidden really well. And speaking about animation, though, yeah, you know what my actual favorite animation is in this show, but you actually get to see it in like every episode.
What is it?
During the ending theme where Sensei's doing her little like kung fu movements.
Oh yes.
I love that. Every time it just makes me smile.
You know what? I every time, like, if you type in like anime gifs, that's like one of the most popular gifs, and a lot of people use it. Yeah, it's weird. A lot of people use that GIF, and I see it around all the time, and I'm like, you probably haven't even seen Denki-Gai and you're using it.
I gotta try this right now. Anime GIFs. Let's see what I get.
You might not see it now, but I remember back in the day, everyone was fucking using it. And I'm like, bruh, you haven't even seen Denki-Gai and it's like 2017. Why are you using this GIF? It was just like a lot of people were using it for some reason. I don't know why.
It's hilarious. And it's smooth too. Just her whole motion and movement. It's just so smooth.
It was weird, but I liked it. It's quite a nice thing. But speaking of the opening and ending, what did you quite think of it? Because to be honest with you, I wasn't impressed with the opening and ending. I was impressed with the scenes that were shown, like the actual animation that was shown in the opening and ending. I didn't quite understand the opening with the apples.
The opening is just weird.
Yeah.
And the music is okay. Like it sounds like you're almost like typical slice of life kind of music that you would hear as an opening. So I thought the opening was just okay, but I enjoyed the ending. I really did.
I like the ending as well, and part of me thinks that the ending should have been the opening and the opening should have been the ending, because
there's been a lot of shows where I've ended up liking the endings far better than the openings. Like, and I've noticed that. Like, granted, this is a little bit of an older show now, but I just was thinking about this the other day that even recently there's been a lot of shows like that where I've enjoyed the ending a lot more than the opening.
But it just makes me feel that the ending was more energetic, and I felt as though that would have been a better opening for the show, because Denki-Gai is energetic, right? It's got, I don't know, it just feels, it's a bright and airy show. Like, it feels like, when you watch it, you feel like you gain energy. So other than that, I mean, the music in itself wasn't that good. It's not something that I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna go and listen to this right now. It's your typical sort of slice of life type of music in the background, you know what I mean? It wasn't anything to sort of write home about.
Yeah, no, I agree.
But we did mention the voice acting. The voice acting, fucking superb. Like, what the hell went on? Like, how the hell did they get this crazy cast?
I don't know, but like I said, if you said, go on Mao and look up Denki-Gai, look at the voice cast, and just go through and see all the roles they've done. Like, probably like the one with actually like the least pedigree is actually Kameko, who was like, my favorite character on the show. But even then, she's been in a bunch of stuff too. But like, just like I said, I don't want to spoil it for people, so I want people to like watch the show, maybe hear our podcast, and then go in here and look the stuff up for themselves, and like they'll be like, what, really? They were in this, and like just the list goes on and on and on.
And you know what? It's quite surprising, because I don't know, it just seemed a bit odd to me. Like, I didn't realize that until I saw the list of characters and the cast, and I was like, damn it, what? But you could tell, because it really does add to the show, because each character is quite varied in terms of their voice. I mean, even with Kameko, she sounds like a little cute mouse. Like, it's that kind of thing. Like, the characters have very distinct voices and character designs.
That's what's funny though too, is that like some of these, one voice I did kind of recognize right off the bat, but some others that after I looked it up, I was like, holy cow. I was like, I can't believe, like, this person's got range, because like you'll see a character they did in this show that is completely different than their other roles.
I want to know, because obviously the show ended in a particular way. We know how the show ended. How did you think about the ending, and would you want to see a second season?
I mean, it's really difficult, because I really enjoyed the show. I'm gonna say personally, I would like to see more, because I would want to see these supposed relationships actually get fleshed out. But at the same time, I kind of understand them leaving it open-ended and like to let people think about what's going on with these characters. But I would actually like to see some kind of growth from it. I think that's I mean, there was growth during the series, don't get me wrong, but like I guess I just want to see things come to a more natural ending than just leaving it open. So that's me personally, I would want to see more, but
Now, for me, I would say the answer would be no and yes. Now, it seems a bit odd.
I'm in the same boat when you say that, because it's like, yeah, like personally I would want to do it, but at the same time, like if a second season did get made, again, it wouldn't be one of those shows I would pick up right away and be like, okay, I'm gonna wait for that one to finish and I'll go watch it later.
And I get it that we probably never see a second season, because even the manga, I'm not sure if you know this, the manga only had 15 volumes, so basically we covered all of the manga in the anime, thereabout. There might have been some things that were missing, but basically every volume equated to almost every episode of the anime. So we're basically run out of source material. But in the case that we did want to see a second season, I genuinely, like I said, I wouldn't want to see a second season, because the way that the show ended was very sort of light and breezy. But at the same time, there was certain things that made me want to see a second season, or in fact, maybe not even a second season, but maybe a prequel. And I keep on saying this on Kunai, because sometimes I think prequels are more interesting. But I want to see, because I'm not sure if you saw, there was a girl that was reading the Ero manga right at the end. She was like a high school girl, and then there was this kid. Do you know who the kid was?
No.
Right at the end, the final scene of the show, the kid was Kantoku. I don't know if you clocked on that.
I did not.
The kid that was wearing
now.
the hat, that was Kantoku, and the woman that was reading, or the girl that was reading the Ero manga was Erohon Jimen. So they put that in there, and it made me think, like, why did they put that in there? It felt like a tease for a second season, kind of like, you know, Good Luck Girl, how they basically, actually, I don't want to spoil good, well, I'm gonna have to.
But... No, don't do it.
Okay, well, watch the Good Luck Girl episode, because there is a scene that sort of teases a second season, but it's like, we obviously didn't get a second season, do you know what I mean? So it feels like it might be the case that they maybe wanted to pursue the story a little bit more. And I kind of wanted to know Kantoku's story arc a little bit more, because we know, once again, we know his name is Kantoku, which means director. It's not revealed to us the fact that he wants to be, the fact that he was given the nickname director. I maybe want to see either a prequel or maybe a web series, because sometimes anime do that. Maybe a web series in which we get to see more about Kantoku, maybe a little bit more about Erohon Jimen, or possibly even Sensei. Like, there is a lot of, because we're told, right, that a lot of these characters are sort of new, because obviously Umio is quite new to the cast of characters. He's like a very new character, right? So I want to know about them beforehand, possibly maybe with...
It's probably the most frustrating part of the show is just how much is left open, I guess is the easiest way of saying it. There's so much stuff that isn't answered.
And that's one of the reasons why I kind of want a second season to get those answers out, but at the same time, I don't think the show is good enough to even get a second season, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I get it.
It got ended in such a way, and I'm content with the ending. Although I will say this, in a sense, I am content with the ending, but I thought the ending was a bit naff. It felt a bit too cutesy for me. It felt like it didn't feel like a real ending. It was like more of a fan service ending, just like, hey, thank you for watching type of ending.
That's a really good way to say that. Well, I mean, they literally say the whole thank you for watching too type thing in the final episode, but it's... And I don't want to, make this sound like I'm being a jerk to the series, because I really enjoyed this show. I mean, I really did, and I'm glad that I watched it, and I'd probably watch it again sometime when I felt like it. But the ending, to me, just feels weak. But like I said, that's just from like a personal aspect of where I want to see, where these, not just relationships go, but do these characters get to meet any of their dreams and things like that. I just want to know more, period.
And that, I would say, goes on to the point of, would you want to recommend the show? You've already mentioned that you loved it, but would you recommend the show? And if so, who would you recommend it to?
I mean, it would be really hard for me to just generally recommend the show, mostly just because, one, I wouldn't know a whole lot of people who would really be into it. But like I said, I have like friends back home that are will just message me from time to time looking for anime recommendations, because they know that I watch so much of it, and they're kind of lighter on that side. But like, even like to them, I don't think I could recommend something like this. But if I knew someone was into this genre of show and hadn't seen it yet, I would recommend it, kind of like how you recommended it to me, and now I'm happy that I watched it. But like, to a general audience, no, but to a very specific audience, yes, I would recommend it too.
And the funny thing is, I have a very similar sentiment, because I notice how I have you on this episode and not Kevin, right? Because when we initially recorded it, I don't think we fully appreciated it, because we haven't grown as anime fans to the point where we could appreciate this type of show, right? Going back to it, yes, I did enjoy Denki-Gai. There's no longer the Denki-Gai curse of kunai anymore, but I find it very hard to recommend this show to people. And yes, I had you on this episode because I feel as though, Will, you are the type of person to appreciate the show because of how much anime knowledge you do have, but also, the fact that you've seen so many different types of shows and understand so many different references, and the fact that you actually had an opportunity to go, or because you live in Japan, go and actually visit a lot of these manga shops that this show was based around. So like I said, it's a very, very interesting show. It has its type of viewer base, but I understand why the show didn't sell that well. I mean, I understand why it didn't do so well, not just because of what it was up against, but even if it was up against nothing, I can understand why it wouldn't do so well.
It really just feels like the show had like all the cards stacked against them, you know what I mean? And that doesn't mean it's a bad show, not at all. Like I just keep saying
No, it's not. It's not a bad show at all.
I really enjoyed the show, you know? And it's hard to describe without me saying the show disappointed me, because it didn't disappoint me. It's just that it's very difficult to A, recommend it, and then B, I want more, but more just from the fact that I'm into the story, and I think it could have been more.
And the funny thing is, right, is that there's going to be a lot of people when a Haran-chan comes out, right, that they're going to go and see the other works from this author, and they will pass by Denki-Gai, and they might feel as though, oh, they're a bit disappointed. And I understand that, because Denki-Gai in itself is an incredible niche within another niche. And sometimes it feels that Denki-Gai was possibly produced as an homage or a thank you to the other people in the industry, possibly other inspirational people to the author. It felt like that. And that might be one of the reasons why, you know, that they were able to pull so many strings in terms of getting studios involved, and in terms of getting all these different references, and in terms of getting all these different seiyus, right? So to me, it just felt like a love letter to the industry in a sense.
Yeah,
right?
it's funny that, like, you say that love letter, but it's like, and again, I'm not saying this as a derogatory term, but it feels like a good name for this show would be like, you know, manga/anime inside joke, the anime.
Yeah, exactly. And which it is. And that's why I'm saying that I can't recommend it to a lot of people, because on Kunai, we recommend it to a lot of new people. Oh, you know what? You should watch this anime if you're new to anime. And I think it also makes sense why we didn't like the anime to begin with, was because we were new to anime. This is not a show to watch unless you've seen a shit ton of anime, because you're not going to get any of the references. Like, you won't enjoy it.
Well, not just the anime and manga references, but the anime and manga culture references.
Exactly.
If you're not in on the culture so much, is going to leave you out.
And I think, like I said, I think this is a show for like hardcore otaku, and possibly not even otaku in the West. Like, if you live in the West, this is definitely might not even be a show for you. If you're a hardcore otaku in Japan, I think you would enjoy this a lot more, because you have access to manga. Like, for example, manga shops aren't a thing in the UK. We have comic book stores, but we don't have manga shops. And I think the reason is because publishing and printing in Japan is just so cheap, right? Because they do it all in-house, right? They, like, over here it's really expensive, you know, we have to import manga. It's a bit messy, but in general I think a Japanese audience would appreciate this show a lot more. But yeah, I mean, I think that sort of puts Denki-Gai to rest. It puts it to bed. You know, we can now bury the hatchet with Denki-Gai.
I'm glad I was able to kind of like resuscitate, revive, maybe, you know, revitalize this whole Denki-Gai curse. Maybe you can like move on and like start referencing like another difficult time, so we can't keep dragging this cute show down.
I think we were very harsh initially, and you know, it was a meme, and I think now it's time to put that meme to bed. I don't think we're going to make any more Denki-Gai. Well, okay, I can't make any promises. Me and Kevin, because we were there, we lived it. We lived Denki-Gai, the original recording, and I still have the audio for that, and I'm never going to show it to anyone because it's such a horrible episode. But we lived through that, so we might make Denki-Gai memes every once in a while, but I think we've put it to bed now.
We know what we're going to call this. This is Denki-Gai The Revenge.
The Revenge. Yeah, the Revenge of Denki-Gai. And you know what? I'm actually really happy how this episode went. I think we gave it a good shot. It isn't the best anime, but I think we did we did the show justice.
One word describes this show, and that's fun.
Yeah, good old-fashioned fun. And that being said, thank you, Will, for coming on.
A pleasure as always. I look forward to when we get to do it again.
Will, what is the next episode of Kunai? Because I'm pretty sure you've made a suggestion, but I want to hear you say it.
If I recall correctly, it's going to be season 1 of Princess Connect.
Hopefully we record that next week, which is kind of crazy because you'll be hearing that episode like a month after this one airs, but we'll be recording that one next week. Hopefully that's good. I haven't started it yet, but after this recording, I'm probably going to get started, and yeah, hopefully that's a good episode as well. But yeah, big thanks to our sponsors, Japan Crate and Crunchyroll, where you can watch this anime. If you want to make a suggestion for Kunai, you can do it on our Twitter page at Get Life Podcast, or alternatively, join our Discord page, because, you know, we are a fun bunch. We are a small community, but I think when we get into anime discussions, when we get into gaming discussions, gets really, really interesting. So be sure to join our Discord, getalifepodcast.com/Discord. That being said, bye.
Peace.